Have you ever stopped to wonder, what if the worst moments in your life, the ones that shattered you, embarrassed you, made you question your worth, were never meant to break you, but to reveal you? We don't talk about rejection honestly. We either pretend it doesn't bother us or we hide from it entirely. But here's the uncomfortable truth: rejection changes you. Not in the romantic, heroic way we like to post on social media. No, I'm talking about the kind of rejection that makes your stomach drop, your voice shake, your mind spiral at 2 a.m., replaying what you said, what you didn't say, and why you were never enough. But what if I told you that wasn't the end of your story? Let's go back for a moment. Remember the first time you were rejected, really rejected. Maybe it was someone you loved who didn't love you back. Maybe it was a parent who couldn't give you the emotional presence you needed. Maybe it was a job, a dream, a group of people that made you feel invisible. That moment didn't just hurt, it shaped you. It taught you quietly and cruelly that approval equals survival. And from that day forward, you began negotiating with the world for your worth, smiling when you were dying inside, trying to be who they wanted, always adjusting, always chasing. But here's where the story begins to shift. Because that same rejection, the one you thought defined your failure, might actually be the key to your transformation. Not despite the pain, but because of it. In that moment of collapse, something else is born, a mirror. One that reflects back everything you've avoided within yourself. And if you're willing to look into it, really look, you may just find the truth you've been running from your entire life. This isn't about getting back what you lost. It's about discovering who you were before you thought you had to earn love. We're taught to run from rejection, to avoid it, outsmart it, disguise it. It's the villain of every story we silently carry, the one we never talk about, but always remember. That one moment you were told you're not what we want. You're not good enough. You're too much. You're not enough. Words that echo through your chest years later in the quiet hours when the world is asleep and your mind replays scenes you can't seem to forget. But what if we've misunderstood rejection all along? What if it's not the enemy, but the mirror? Not the end of the road, but the beginning of self-recognition. Rejection isn't random. It shows up at the exact moment you've begun to outsource your self-worth. It enters your life when you've started measuring your value through someone else's eyes. It stings not because of what they said, but because something inside you believes it's true. That's the part no one wants to admit. Rejection doesn't create pain, it reveals it. It cracks open the surface and forces you to look beneath it. And what you find there isn't just sadness, it's shame, insecurity, the ache of never being fully seen, fully wanted, fully chosen. But here's the paradox: rejection hurts the most when you've already rejected yourself. When you've made their opinion your mirror. When you've handed your identity to someone else like a fragile object and prayed they wouldn't drop it. And when they do, when they walk away or turn you down or look right through you, it feels like confirmation that you were broken all along. But that's not the truth. It's just the illusion you've carried. Rejection, when seen clearly, is a wake-up call. It's a sacred disruption. It says, look deeper. Something in you still depends on being wanted to feel worthy. And that's where the work begins. Because the real question is never, why did they reject me? The real question is, why does this shake me so deeply? And if you're brave enough to ask that question, if you dare to confront the part of you that's still waiting for permission to exist, then rejection becomes the very tool that frees you. It becomes the mirror you finally stop avoiding. And in that reflection, you don't just see the pain, you see the power you've been giving away. And maybe you start to take it back. Rejection doesn't just hurt, it burns. And not in a fleeting way. Not like a scrape that stings for a moment and fades. It cuts deeper. It reaches parts of you that you didn't even know were wounded. It scrapes against memories you forgot you were still carrying. Maybe it was a parent's silence, a lover's sudden distance, a friend's betrayal wrapped in polite words. Whatever it was, rejection has a way of triggering the oldest version of you, the one that still wonders, even now, am I worthy of being loved as I am? The pain isn't just emotional, it's existential. It shakes your sense of identity. Because in that moment, the moment someone says no or turns away or ghosts you, they're not just declining you. They're unintentionally validating everything you feared about yourself, that you're too much, or not enough. That if people truly saw the real you, they would leave. And when they do, the story feels confirmed. But here's where things get brutally honest, the intensity of that pain. It's not coming from them. It's coming from within you. Rejection doesn't say much about the other person. It speaks volumes about your unhealed places. Carl Jung once wrote that everything that irritates us in others can lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves. That applies here in its rawest form. The pain of rejection is the psyche's way of signaling, hey, there's something here that hasn't been faced. It's a flare from the unconscious begging you to stop abandoning yourself. It wants you to see what you're still avoiding, that old story you keep reenacting, hoping this time it ends differently. And maybe deep down you already know. Maybe you felt it every time you shapeshift to be likable. Every time you say yes when you mean no. Every time you hide what you really feel to keep the peace. It builds until one moment of rejection breaks the dam, and suddenly it all floods back. But what if that's the point? What if rejection isn't here to punish you, but to awaken you? What if it arrives exactly when it's time to face the parts of yourself you've kept in the dark? This is the pain that precedes transformation, the ache that pushes you out of illusion. The moment when you realize this isn't about them anymore. It's about you, about how deeply you've been waiting to be chosen while secretly refusing to choose yourself. And that realization, that's the beginning of everything. Approval feels good for a moment. The smile, the compliment, the I choose you, they land like sunlight on your skin after days of rain. And so, like anyone who's felt the warmth, you want more. But slowly, quietly, that desire twists into a dependency. And before you know it, you're not just seeking approval, you're addicted to it. You start chasing it the way someone might chase a high needing. Just one more hit to feel okay. One more yes. One more you matter. That's how it begins. But that's not where it ends, because over time, the pursuit of approval doesn't lift you, it drains you. It strips you of your essence, one compromise at a time. You stop saying what you believe because you're afraid it might upset someone. You stop showing how you feel because vulnerability might cost you connection. You silence your intuition, your truth, your authenticity, just to avoid rejection. And then something strange happens. The more approval you seek, the less of yourself remains. Eventually you become a version of yourself designed not to be real, but to be liked. This is the trap. The approval you think will protect you is the very thing that weakens you. It makes you fragile, emotionally dependent on forces outside your control. And that dependency emits something subtle yet unmistakable desperation. No matter how polished your appearance is, no matter how kind or well-meaning desperation seeps through. And the human psyche is wired to repel it. We all sense when someone needs us to validate their existence, and instead of drawing us in, it quietly pushes us away. It's a cruel irony, the very thing you chase runs from you. But here's the truth, no one tells you you don't attract people by being agreeable. You attract people by being rooted in your voice, your truth, your self-respect. When you seek approval, you give others the power to define you. And when they withdraw it, you crumble. But when you live from your own center, when you stop begging to be seen, something powerful shifts. You move from being a seeker to a presence. And presence is magnetic in a way approval can never be. You weren't meant to live as a mirror reflecting what others want. You were meant to live as a flame, unapologetically alive, whether someone approves of your light or not. So ask yourself, who have you been becoming just to be accepted? And more importantly, what part of you have you betrayed in the process? Until you answer that, the need for approval will continue to cost you your freedom. And the price is always your peace, your power, and ultimately your sense of self. There's a quiet kind of power that doesn't raise its voice, doesn't beg to be noticed, doesn't chase, doesn't prove, it simply is. That power is detachment, not the cold, emotionless kind people often mistake for apathy, but the kind of detachment that arises from a soul that has nothing left to prove because it's finally come home to itself. You see, we confuse desperation with love. We mistake intensity for depth. We assume that chasing someone, proving our worth, or clinging tightly is how we show care. But none of that is rooted in strength, it's rooted in fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of being abandoned, fear of being forgotten. And when fear drives connection, the result is never love, it's control. Detachment, on the other hand, says, I know who I am. I know what I bring. I will not beg to be chosen. That doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you whole. Real detachment is emotional clarity. It's the ability to feel deeply and still remain grounded, to want something without needing it to define you. It's what happens when you stop trying to fill a hole with someone else's presence because you finally faced the emptiness yourself and made peace with it. And that peace, that's where your magnetism is born. Because the world senses desperation. It repels neediness the way the body rejects poison, but it also senses sovereignty, the subtle radiance of someone who doesn't need to be chased because they're not running from themselves anymore. Someone who doesn't seek validation because they've already validated their own existence. That's the paradox. The less you need approval, the more approval you receive. The less you chase people, the more they're drawn to your calm. Because calm is rare, sovereignty is rare, and in a world addicted to noise, mystery is magnetic. Detachment doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you no longer let external conditions control your internal world. It means you can say, I care for you, but I won't abandon myself to keep you. It means you can walk away not because you don't love, but because you love yourself enough not to stay where you're only half seen. And when you live from that place, you become unshakable. Because you've withdrawn the power you once gave others, the power to define your worth, your value, your place in the world. So no, detachment is not indifference. It is deep awareness wrapped in self-respect. It's the refusal to be ruled by emotional dependency. And in that refusal, you reclaim something sacred, your inner freedom. Wholeness isn't achieved by becoming more perfect. It's achieved by becoming more honest with yourself. And that honesty begins with facing the one part of you that modern life trains you to avoid, your shadow. Carl Jung called it the shadow not because it's evil, but because it's hidden. It's made of everything you've been taught not to be. The parts of yourself you've buried, denied, disowned. Your anger, your jealousy, your insecurity, your shame. All the emotions that didn't fit the persona you thought you needed in order to be loved. But here's the truth, whatever you refuse to face within you owns you from the dark. That's why so many people, even the ones who seem polished, successful, admired, end up quietly breaking down. Because beneath the surface of who they show the world is a war they've never admitted they're fighting, a war with the parts of themselves they're ashamed of. And the more you repress those parts, the more they show up in your relationships, your choices, your sabotaging habits. It's not coincidence. It's the shadow trying to be seen. The path to real healing, to real attraction, real presence, real power starts the moment you stop running. The moment you turn inward and ask, what have I been hiding from myself? It's in that terrifying pause, that silent confrontation, that everything begins to shift. Not because the pain goes away, but because you finally see it clearly. You begin to understand the shadow isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to complete you. It holds the emotions you abandoned, the instincts you suppressed, the truth you were afraid to speak. And once you bring light to it, not to shame it, but to listen to it, something extraordinary happens. The fear loses power, the anxiety quiets, the compulsions start to loosen, and in their place you begin to feel something new, something rare, inner coherence. You're no longer at war with yourself. This is individuation, the psychological process of becoming whole. Not a highlight reel version of yourself, but the real one. A self that contains both light and dark, confidence and insecurity, strength and vulnerability. And when you live from that integrated place, you stop needing to be chosen because you've finally chosen yourself. And the world, it senses it. You don't even need to explain it. Your energy speaks louder than words ever could. We spend so much of our lives trying not to be rejected by others that we fail to realize the most dangerous rejection isn't external, it's internal. It's not when they say no, it's when you say no to yourself. Quietly, repeatedly, without even noticing. It happens in subtle, almost invisible ways. Each time you silence your truth to keep the peace. Each time you downplay your desires to seem agreeable. Each time you shrink so others can feel comfortable in your presence. You might not call it rejection, but that's exactly what it is. You abandon your own voice to be liked. You betray your boundaries just to belong. And slowly, silently, you become a stranger to yourself. The world might still see a version of you, but deep down you know it's not the real one. It's the edited version, the approved version, the one you built to avoid being alone. But here's the tragic irony. The very thing you do to protect yourself, self-rejection, is the thing that wounds you most deeply, because you can survive someone else's rejection. But when you reject yourself, there's no place left to run. You carry that pain everywhere, into every relationship, every decision, every mirror. You become hyper-aware of others' opinions, constantly scanning their faces for signs that you're not enough. But the truth is, you already believed that long before they did. Their rejection only hurts because it matches a belief you secretly hold about yourself. That's the real wound. That's what makes rejection unbearable, not the external no, but the internal confirmation. Maybe I'm not worth choosing. And until that belief is confronted, nothing changes. You can change your job, your partner, your city, but the wound follows you because it's inside you. So what's the way out? It begins with radical self-acceptance, with looking in the mirror and saying, I've ignored myself long enough. It means learning to stay with your own needs even when no one else validates them. It means honoring your voice even when it shakes. Choosing your path even when no one claps for you. It's uncomfortable, it's lonely, but it's also liberating. Because when you stop rejecting yourself, something powerful shifts. The opinions of others lose their grip. External approval becomes a bonus, not a requirement. And for the first time, you begin to feel what it means to belong to yourself. And in that moment, you realize you were never broken. You were just buried under layers of your own disapproval. Have you ever noticed how certain experiences keep finding you over and over again? Different faces, different places, but the same pain, the same heartbreak, the same betrayal, the same feeling of being invisible, overlooked, abandoned. It almost feels like life is following a cruel script, one you never agreed to, but keep performing anyway. But what if I told you it's not life that's repeating, it's you? Or more precisely, it's the parts of you that remain unresolved. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What he meant is simple but uncomfortable. The emotional wounds, you don't heal the patterns, you don't confront the shadows you refuse to face, they will keep writing your story without your permission. That's why you keep ending up in relationships that feel eerily similar. That's why you attract the same emotional dynamics, even when you think you've changed everything on the outside. It's not a coincidence. It's a signal, a message from within. Your shadow, that part of you you've tried to ignore, is speaking. And when you don't listen, it gets louder. Every repetition is a request for awareness. Life is not punishing you, it's pointing you. It's pointing toward the wound you still haven't looked at, the abandonment you've never truly processed, the rejection you buried but never released, the version of you that still believes you need to prove yourself to be loved. You see, the universe is a mirror, and it reflects not what you want but who you really are beneath the masks and performances. And until you acknowledge that, the cycle continues. Pain becomes your teacher, patterns become your prison. But here's the empowering truth: you can break the cycle. And it doesn't start by blaming others or changing your environment. It starts with the radical act of self-inquiry. What is this moment trying to teach me about me? When you begin to answer that question honestly, everything changes. Repetition turns into revelation. Pain becomes transformation. And those old cycles that once trapped you become the very tools that set you free. So next time life hands you the same rejection, the same heartbreak, the same silence, pause. Look deeper, because you're not cursed. You're being called to finally wake up to what's still unresolved within. We all want transformation, but very few are willing to pay its real price. Because true change doesn't come wrapped in comfort, applause, or positivity. It doesn't show up in a pretty quote on your Instagram feed. It comes wrapped in silence, in pain, in loneliness, in the moments when you're forced to sit with the parts of yourself you've spent your entire life avoiding. Everyone says they want to grow, but growth doesn't happen in the light, it begins in the dark. It begins when you stop running, when the distractions no longer work, when the noise of the outside world fades and all you're left with is yourself. And that's the part most people avoid. Because facing yourself means facing the shadow, the anger you suppress, the envy you deny, the grief you silence, the longing you bury. It means confronting your own patterns, your own lies, your own projections. It means admitting that the problem might not be out there, that it might be in the way you protect your pain, wear your wounds like armor, and avoid the very truths that could set you free. Carl Jung believed that wholeness isn't achieved by chasing the light, it's achieved by embracing the dark. Because buried in that darkness is your truth. Not the curated truth you show the world, but the raw, unfiltered, messy truth that reveals who you really are. And only by facing it can you begin to rebuild yourself from something real. You cannot heal what you will not face, and you cannot evolve while pretending you're already whole. The path to real transformation asks something deeper of you, not to improve, but to integrate, to sit with your contradictions, to feel the discomfort without numbing it, to allow the fear, the doubt, the shame to rise and not run from it. Because that is where the magic lives. In the quiet moment when you finally stop fighting your own reflection. When you choose to stay and look and feel. Only then does something new begin to emerge, not a new persona, but a deeper self. A self built not on performance, but on truth. Not on validation, but on presence. And in that presence, you become someone different. Not because you tried to change, but because you remembered who you were before you learned to hide. So if you're in the dark right now, don't panic. You're not broken, you're becoming. And this isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your return to the parts of you that always knew. You were meant for more than survival. We live in a world addicted to appearance, a culture where performance is mistaken for presence, and masks are praised more than truth. Social media rewards the polished, the filtered, the curated image of perfection, even if it's hollow, even if it's a lie. We've been conditioned to believe that being accepted means being likable, and being likable means being inoffensive, agreeable, and safe. But here's the truth, no one wants to say out loud likable is forgettable. And perfection is invisible. Because what truly moves people isn't flawlessness, it's authenticity. Not the watered-down kind of authenticity that fits inside a self-help quote. I'm talking about the kind that scares you to share. The kind that feels too raw, too vulnerable, too real. The kind of truth that leaves you exposed, that makes your voice shake when you say it. That kind of authenticity is rare. And because it's rare, it's magnetic. People don't resonate with your image, they resonate with your scars, with your mistakes, with your humanity. Because we are not inspired by someone who has never fallen. We are inspired by someone who fell and got back up without pretending the fall never happened. When you hide your wounds to appear strong, you only deepen the illusion that everyone else has it together and you're the only one falling apart. But here's the reality, everyone is fighting something they're afraid to name. Everyone is carrying a version of shame, fear, or heartbreak that they think disqualifies them from being loved. So when you show up honestly, fully, and say, this is me, and I'm not hiding anymore, you don't lose respect, you gain it. There's a deep hunger in the world right now, not for more beauty, not for more confidence, but for truth. For voices that sound like real life, for stories that don't resolve perfectly, for people who don't pretend to be more healed than they actually are. Because in a sea of masks, your truth is rebellion, it is resistance, and in many ways it is love. Brutal authenticity doesn't push people away. It gives them permission to be real too. And when you do that, when you allow others to breathe around you without needing to impress you, become unforgettable. Not because you were perfect, but because you were true. So if you're tired of hiding, stop. If you're exhausted from performing, step off the stage. Because the moment you choose to live without the mask, you won't just feel more alive, you'll finally be seen. And the ones who truly matter, they won't love you despite your flaws. They'll love you because of them. Rejection is not romantic, it's not poetic. It's not some noble tragedy designed to make you stronger by default. That's a lie we often tell ourselves to make sense of the pain, to soften the blow, to avoid facing what's really there. But rejection isn't inherently transformational. What you do with it is what determines whether it heals you or hardens you. There's a growing trend to romanticize rejection, to turn every no into a mystical sign, every heartbreak into destiny, every silence into a lesson wrapped in gold. But that mindset can be dangerous because it lets you stay stuck glamorizing the suffering instead of growing through it. Not every closed door is sacred. Some are consequences, some are mirrors, some are wake-up calls you'd rather not hear. True growth doesn't come from being rejected. It comes from what rejection reveals about how you see yourself. If you've built your identity on being chosen, then rejection will feel like erasure. If you've placed your value in how others respond to you, then a no will collapse your sense of worth. But here's the truth, no one can reject you more deeply than you already reject yourself. That's why it hurts so much, not because they walked away, but because their leaving validated something you were already afraid was true. So instead of turning rejection into a badge of victimhood, let it become a moment of reckoning. Ask yourself, what part of me was I trying to prove? What was I hoping they'd fix inside me? What need was I handing to someone else praying they'd fulfill it? That kind of inquiry requires courage. It's easier to blame them, easier to resent, to romanticize, to spin the story in a way that makes you the noble sufferer. But growth doesn't come from comfort, it comes from truth. And the truth is, rejection is not an insult, it's an invitation. A call to stop outsourcing your healing, a demand that you stop waiting for someone else to validate your worth. You don't grow by being chosen. You grow by choosing yourself, especially when no one else does. And that's not a fantasy. It's not soft or poetic. It's raw, it's sobering, but it's also the beginning of real power. Because when you stop making rejection your identity, it becomes what it was always meant to be: a redirection, a reminder, a mirror. So the next time someone says no, don't fall into the temptation to romanticize it. Stand still, feel it, learn from it, and then ask yourself the real question: am I finally ready to say yes to myself? There's a strange paradox most people never realize until they're exhausted, heartbroken, or burnt out from trying to be enough. The more you chase something, love, approval, connection, the more it escapes you. The more you reach for it, cling to it, obsess over it, the further it slips away. Why? Because everything you chase, you place above you. And the moment you put something or someone above you, you give away your power. Chasing creates imbalance. It tells the universe, I'm not complete without this. And that energy, that silent desperation, repels the very things you think you want. Not because you're unworthy, but because you're out of alignment with your own essence. People feel it even if they can't explain it. They sense when you've made them your source, when your sense of peace, happiness, or identity hinges on their attention. And that pressure, it's heavy. It turns attraction into obligation, mystery into expectation, and presence into performance. But what if you stop chasing not out of bitterness, but out of clarity? What if you realize that your energy was never meant to beg to prove, to convince? It was meant to radiate, to flow, to express? What if the real shift isn't about what you want, but who you are while you want it? Because when you live fully, when you pursue your mission, deepen your presence, express your truth, you become magnetic. You stop trying to be interesting and instead become interested in your own life, in your own growth, in your own alignment. And here's what happens when you're no longer seeking approval: you start embodying self-respect. When you're no longer chasing love, you start radiating confidence. And without trying, without manipulating, without pretending, people feel pulled toward you. Not because you need them, but because you don't. That's the energy the world can't ignore. Not arrogance, not indifference, but fullness. The fullness of someone who has stopped waiting for permission to live. So ask yourself honestly, what would your life look like if you stopped chasing, if you stopped needing to be validated, seen, accepted, and started living like your existence was already worthy because it is? And when you operate from that truth, you no longer move through life with outstretched hands. You walk through it rooted in your values, in your presence, in your purpose. You don't chase what you attract. You don't beg for what you embody. And when you become the thing you were searching for, it comes to you effortlessly. One of the greatest lies we've ever been sold is that fulfillment comes from outside of us. That happiness is something we'll find when we're finally loved, finally successful, finally admired. We're taught from an early age to look outward to earn validation, to seek praise, to win approval. It becomes a game. If I can just get them to love me, accept me, choose me, then I'll feel complete. Then I'll be enough. But here's the haunting truth. No one prepares you for you can get all of it. The love, the applause, the relationship, the money, the body, the lifestyle. and still feel empty. You can achieve the dream only to find a quiet, suffocating hollowness waiting at the end of it. Because no external victory can ever silence an internal war. When you believe fulfillment is something that exists outside of you, you live in a constant state of pursuit. You keep running, keep chasing, keep reaching for the next thing, and then the next and the next, hoping that eventually something will land deep enough to make you feel whole. But it never does. Because it never could. Why? Because the part of you that feels incomplete was never asking for something external in the first place. It was asking for attention, for healing, for truth. It was asking you to come home to yourself. The more we chase fulfillment out there, the more disconnected we become from what's in here. We forget how to be with ourselves, how to listen, how to feel. We become strangers to our own inner world, addicted to distraction, validation, stimulation. But when the noise fades and you're alone with yourself, you feel it. The ache, the emptiness, the quiet voice whispering, "This isn't it." And that whisper is not your weakness. It's your invitation. Because the only real fulfillment is born within. It comes when you stop outsourcing your peace. When you stop handing your self-worth to people who don't even know who they are. It comes when you realize nothing you chase will ever matter if you don't feel whole before you get it. That's not a limitation, that's liberation. Because once you learn how to give yourself what you've been begging the world for, love, validation, presence, you become free. You stop performing, you stop pretending, and you start being fully, authentically, unapologetically. So ask yourself now with brutal honesty, have you been chasing something that you were meant to become instead? Because the world cannot complete you, it can only reflect what you've chosen to see in yourself. At some point in life, everyone will be rejected by a person, a community, an opportunity, or even a version of the future they once believed in. And while rejection often feels like a dead end, it's actually a mirror revealing where you've abandoned yourself long before the world did. The real message is this: you don't need to be chosen to be worthy. You don't need to be approved to live fully. And you don't need anyone else's permission to honor who you are. The most dangerous rejection is not what others do to you. It's what you do to yourself when you minimize your voice, betray your needs, or stay silent just to fit in. That kind of self-rejection is what keeps people stuck in cycles of pain, pretending, and emotional dependency. But here's the shift: when you begin to listen inward, when you stop chasing external validation and start rebuilding your sense of worth from the inside out, everything changes. You become more grounded, more magnetic, and more free. You no longer live for applause, you live for alignment. So if you're tired of feeling like you're never enough, maybe it's time to stop asking the world to see you and start seeing yourself. Start choosing yourself not as a backup plan, but as your first truth. Because once you do that, rejection loses its power and you finally reclaim your own.